A woman vanishes on a 5-minute drive home in small-town America. No crash. No struggle. No body. Police say the case is simple, until her name suddenly appears at a hospital in another state. Now 2 timelines collide, and one innocent life is about to be erased. And the next discovery changes everything. If you think people only disappear in big cities, you're wrong. This story begins in Riverton, Wyoming, a quiet American town where unlocked doors were normal, and the local police station closed its front desk at 10 p.m. sharp. Nothing truly dangerous had happened there in over 20 years. Until Emily Carter vanished on a 5-minute drive home. No crash. No broken glass. No abandoned car. Just an empty stretch of highway and a phone still connected to her car's Bluetooth system. What makes this case different is not the disappearance itself. It's what happened next. 36 hours later, a woman using Emily's name walked into a hospital in Billings, Montana, claiming she had escaped from a man who was holding her somewhere in rural Wyoming. Her fingerprints matched. Her medical records matched. Her face matched every photo on file. But her story didn't. The timeline collapsed under one simple fact. At the exact moment she said she was being held captive, traffic cameras showed Emily's car driving through Riverton. Someone was lying. And for the next 4 days, the police would chase 2 versions of the same woman, both apparently real. Emily Carter left the parking lot of the Riverton Public Library at 9:12 p.m. A night clerk remembered the exact time because Emily had joked about closing too early on a Friday. She was wearing a gray hoodie, black jeans, and the same running shoes she always kept in her trunk for late-night jogs. Her apartment was less than 5 minutes away. At 9:14 p.m., her phone connected to her car's Bluetooth system and automatically opened a call log to her best friend, Sarah Whitman. The call never went through. It rang twice, then stopped. That was the last confirmed action Emily ever made. At 9:31 p.m., her mother reported her missing. Police assumed panic at first. Emily was 26, responsible, and had never disappeared before. Officers drove the route between the library and her apartment twice. Nothing looked disturbed. No skid marks. No damaged guardrails. No abandoned vehicle. Then a state traffic camera captured something that changed the tone of the search. Emily's silver sedan passed through a highway junction outside Riverton at 9:18 p.m. It was heading in the opposite direction of her home. There was no record of a turn. No reason for her to be on that road. And according to her phone's location data, Emily Carter was still sitting in the library parking lot. At the same time, at 11:03 a.m. the next morning, a nurse at a hospital in Billings called local police about a shaken young woman in the emergency waiting room. She had no purse, no phone, no visible injuries. But she knew her full name. Emily Carter. She said she had escaped just after sunrise. A man had been keeping her in a small trailer somewhere outside Riverton. She couldn't describe the road. She couldn't describe the town. Only the smell of gasoline, the sound of a generator, and a blue tarp nailed across a single window. When officers asked how she got to Billings, she hesitated. "I ran until someone picked me up," she said. "A man in a truck. He dropped me near the hospital." Her fingerprints confirmed it. So did her driver's license photo. So did a small scar above her left eyebrow that matched a childhood medical record. But when investigators pulled the highway footage from the same morning, a second detail quietly destroyed the relief in the room. At 7:42 a.m., Emily's silver sedan was recorded driving through Riverton. Clean. Undamaged. With a single person visible in the driver's seat. And at that exact moment, the woman claiming to be Emily was signing hospital intake forms, 90 miles away. By noon, 2 police departments were quietly coordinating across state lines. Riverton officers stayed with the car. Billings detectives stayed with the woman. and both sides were starting to realize they were no longer working a missing person case. They were working a duplication. In a small interview room, Emily Carter sat with a paper cup of water in both hands. She described the trailer again. The blue tarp. The generator. The man who never used her name. But when a detective asked the most basic question, "How long were you held?" her answer changed. 2 days, she said at first. Then, after a pause, "No, 3. The detective gently pushed. She couldn't explain the first night after leaving the library. Couldn't remember sleeping. Couldn't remember eating. Only the moment she woke up in the trailer. Meanwhile, in Riverton, officers searched Emily's sedan after locating it parked behind a closed self-storage facility. Inside the car, nothing appeared disturbed, except the driver's seat. It was pushed far back. Too far back for Emily's height. And on the steering wheel, partially wiped away, technicians recovered a second set of fingerprints. They didn't belong to any known suspect. They belonged to Emily Carter. Already on file. Twice. The fingerprint analyst called Riverton police just after 4:30 p.m. Not to confirm a match. To report something that wasn't supposed to happen. Both fingerprint sets taken from the steering wheel were real. Both belonged to Emily Carter. But they weren't identical copies pulled from the same record. They came from 2 different historical submissions. 2 separate arrests. 2 separate booking scans. Same name. Same date of birth. Same fingerprints. Filed 11 years apart. Riverton detectives quietly pulled Emily's juvenile record. At age 15, she had been briefly detained after running away from a foster placement. Her prints were taken and sealed. The second set came from a traffic stop 3 years ago in Colorado. Same prints. Different photo. The woman in the more recent booking photo had a thinner face, a sharper jaw, and no scar above her left eyebrow. Back in Billings, detectives decided to test something small. They showed the hospital Emily a childhood photo taken the year before she entered foster care. She stared at it for a long time. "That's me," she finally said. Then added, softly, "But I don't remember her." At that exact moment, Riverton officers received a new traffic alert. Emily's silver sedan had just been seen again. Leaving town. With someone else driving it. The alert hit every patrol car in Fremont County. Emily Carter's silver sedan had crossed the western camera line at 5:11 p.m., heading toward a long empty stretch of U.S. highway that cut straight into open ranchland. Riverton officers were only 7 minutes away. They never caught it. By the time a trooper reached the next junction, the car was already gone. No turns recorded, no breakdowns reported, and no plate hits anywhere beyond that single camera. But the footage itself created a new problem. The driver was clearly visible. And it wasn't the woman sitting in a hospital bed in Billings. The driver had longer hair pulled into a tight bun. No visible scar above the eyebrow. Her posture was different, too. More rigid, almost rehearsed, like someone trying very hard to look ordinary. Back in Billings, detectives quietly stepped out of the interview room and watched the live feed from Riverton. No one spoke for nearly 30 seconds. Then one officer said it out loud. "If that's not her." The hospital Emily was still inside, still cooperative, still wrapped in a borrowed sweatshirt. She had no idea another woman, using her face, her name, and her car, had just slipped through a police net built specifically for her. And for the first time since the case began, investigators were forced to ask a dangerous question. What if the woman in custody wasn't the victim? Detectives in Billings decided to stop asking big questions. They asked one small one instead. "What's your middle name?" The woman in the hospital bed answered instantly. "Marie." The problem was simple. Emily Carter's middle name, according to her sealed foster placement file, her school enrollment records, and her original birth certificate, was Anne. The detective didn't react. He only nodded and made a note. Then he tried again. What was the name of the street you lived on before foster care? She hesitated. Just long enough. I don't remember the street. I was a kid. But real memory doesn't disappear evenly. It breaks in pieces. Names fade. Faces blur. Sounds remain. Yet every detail she gave about the trailer, the tarp, the generator, and the man who held her was sharp. Cinematic. Rehearsed. Down the hall, another officer quietly pulled a childhood voicemail saved in Emily's old school file, a recording made during a class project. They brought it into the room and played it without warning. A small girl's voice filled the space. "Hi. My name is Emily and Carter." The woman's hands tightened around the paper cup. She smiled. But her eyes never blinked. Not once. After the voicemail, the interview ended quietly. Too quietly. Detectives didn't accuse her. They didn't challenge her story. They simply told her she needed to stay overnight for observation. She agreed without hesitation. That was the final confirmation. Real victims argue when you try to delay them. She didn't. In Riverton, a senior records clerk was given a direct order to unlock a sealed juvenile case tied to Emily's foster placement, something that required 2 supervisors and a written justification. Inside the thin paper folder was a document no one remembered creating. It was labeled, "Sibling Intake, Emergency Separation, Not Cousin, Not Unrelated Minor, Sibling." The report described 2 girls, brought in together at age 4 after a domestic disturbance in Casper, Wyoming. Both were named Emily. Same birthday. Same last name. The social worker had noted it as confusing but temporary, and assigned them different case numbers until the situation could be clarified. It never was. One child was transferred out of state within 48 hours. The other stayed in Wyoming. Only one of them kept the name. In Billings, the woman calling herself Emily lay in a hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since she arrived, she whispered something no one asked her. She was always the better one. The phrase stopped the nurse in the doorway. She was always the better one. The woman quickly covered it with a cough, a smile, an apology. But the damage was done. Billings detectives requested the sealed foster transfer file from out of state. It arrived just after midnight. The other child, the one sent away at 4 years old, had been relocated to a private placement in Rapid City, South Dakota. New last name. New birth record issued. Original identity sealed at the request of the receiving family. The case note was brief. Child displayed extreme attachment to sibling. Separation recommended. Back in Riverton, officers searched the abandoned self-storage facility where Emily's car had first been recovered. Behind one of the unused units, they found something small. A child's old plastic bracelet. 2 names carved into it with uneven letters. Emily. Emily. In Billings, the detective returned to the hospital room with one final photograph. It showed 2 little girls, identical in every visible way, standing in front of a foster home porch. He slid it across the tray table. "You weren't taken," he said calmly. "You were switched." For the first time, the woman's smile collapsed. And quietly, without anger, without tears, she corrected him. "No," she said. "I fixed it. They didn't arrest her. Not yet. They needed the other girl first. The one who had been driving the car. The one who still had the scar." In the early hours of the morning, investigators finally located a rural property 40 miles west of Riverton, an off-grid trailer listed under a shell rental company. No cameras. No neighbors. No utilities on record. Inside, they found proof that someone had been living there for weeks. 2 coffee mugs. 2 toothbrushes. 2 beds pushed close together. and a locked interior door. When they forced it open, the smell told them everything before the light did. Emily Carter, the real one, was alive. Barely. She lay on a thin mattress, wrists bruised, a strip of duct tape still stuck to the wall beside her head like it had been ripped away in a hurry. At the hospital, she could only whisper. She said it was my turn to rest. She said I was tired of being me. Back in Billings, detectives returned to the other woman. They told her Emily had been found. The reaction wasn't panic. It was relief. "She won't have to pretend anymore," she said softly. Then she leaned forward. "And now, neither will I." They turned the recorder on at 3:18 a.m. She watched the red light carefully. "I wasn't supposed to be the one who stayed," she said. Her voice was calm, practiced, almost gentle. She explained it the way a child would explain a rule that had never made sense. When they were 4, the social worker chose the quieter girl, the one who smiled on command, the one who didn't cry when strangers picked her up. "That was her," she said. "Not me." After the separation, she bounced through 3 placements in 2 years. The records showed neglect. 1 closed investigation. 1 emergency removal. But she didn't talk about any of that. She talked about watching Emily's life online. School photos. Graduation. A job. An apartment. A normal name that stayed the same. "So I borrowed it," she said simply. The plan wasn't sudden. She'd contacted Emily months earlier using a fake account. Slowly, carefully, rebuilding a connection that only one of them remembered. When they finally met in Riverton, Emily hugged her. That made it easier. "I didn't want her dead," she said. "I just wanted her to stop." She lifted her eyes to the detective. "And I wanted to start." The courtroom in Fremont County was full long before the judge entered. Emily Carter sat in the front row, wrapped in a borrowed jacket, her hands folded so tightly they had gone pale. The scar above her eyebrow was still faintly purple from where medical tape had been removed. Behind her, the woman who had taken her name sat perfectly straight. When the judge read the charges, kidnapping, identity theft, unlawful imprisonment, and aggravated fraud, she showed no reaction. Not when the prosecutor described the locked room. Not when the photographs of the trailer were entered into evidence. Only once did she look at Emily. And when she did, she smiled. The court sentenced her to 32 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 20. The judge called it a calculated erasure of another human being. But later, when a reporter asked Emily how she felt about the outcome, she struggled to answer. Because the hardest part wasn't the locked door. It wasn't the weeks of silence. It was what her sister had said to her the night before the arrest. "You don't understand," she had whispered through the crack in the door. "I wasn't trying to take your life. I was trying to put myself back where I belonged." Emily Carter moved out of Riverton 6 months later. Not because the town blamed her. Not because anyone treated her differently. But because every grocery aisle, every stoplight, every empty stretch of road carried the echo of someone else wearing her face. She kept her job. She kept her apartment for a while. She kept her name. That mattered more than anything. In court records, the woman who tried to replace her is now listed under the legal identity she had lived under for nearly 2 decades. The stolen name was formally stripped away in a quiet administrative hearing. No press, no cameras, no audience. Just a signature. Emily never attended. She didn't need to. What she needed came later, in smaller, harder moments, when she learned how to drive again without gripping the steering wheel, when she slept through the night without checking the lock, when she stopped flinching at the sound of generators and highway trucks. Sometimes, she still thinks about the sentence that started everything. She was always the better one. Emily doesn't argue with it anymore. She doesn't compare. She only corrects one detail. There was never a better one. There was only the one who survived, and the one who finally stopped pretending she could become her. If this story unsettled you, good. It was meant to. Because the scariest part of this case was never the locked door, the fake identity, or even the months Emily spent trapped in a room waiting for someone to remember her name. The scariest part was how easily a life can be copied, and how quietly the original can be pushed out of it. Some crimes explode into headlines. Others unfold in messages, shared photos, friendly conversations, and long-forgotten childhood connections, until one day you realize the person who knows you best might be the one trying to replace you. So here's the question this case leaves behind. How well do you really know the people who suddenly re-enter your life? If this story kept you reading to the very end, there are more real cases like this, stranger, darker, and even harder to believe, waiting to be told. Cases where the danger isn't a masked stranger in the dark, but a familiar face in the light.